She found it by accident. She was not snooping. She was not suspicious. She just needed to borrow his laptop for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, her entire marriage appeared on his screen. Formatted, cold, professional. Filed under a folder labeled Transition Documents. Like she was a liability he had been quietly preparing to write off. She read every word. Then she closed the laptop, went downstairs to their chef's kitchen, made his favorite from scratch, set the table, lit the candles, and sat across from him smiling while he ate and told her about his day. She said absolutely nothing for 3 months. My people, this woman did not just leave a man. She left a kingpin. She dismantled an empire from the inside, quietly, legally, completely, while still pressing his silk shirts. Before we begin today's story, I want to take a moment to give a very special shout-out to Gail Nevels. Gail Nevels, if you're watching this right now, I truly appreciate you. You've been one of the most active voices on this channel, always showing up in the comments, sharing your thoughts, supporting the stories, and bringing positive energy to this community. Viewers like you are the reason this channel keeps growing, and these stories keep being told. Your support does not go unnoticed, and it genuinely means a lot. And to everyone else who keeps coming back, liking the videos, leaving thoughtful comments, sharing the stories with others, thank you. Every single one of you helps turn this channel into a community, not just a place to watch videos. Now, if you're new here, welcome. You've just found a channel where real human stories are told the way they deserve to be told, with depth, emotion, and honesty. Before we dive into today's story, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and tell me where in the world you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Whether you're in Lagos or London, Houston or Johannesburg, Accra or Atlanta, Toronto or Nairobi. Let me see you in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, take a moment and hit that subscribe button, because the story you're about to hear is one you'll want to share with someone the moment it ends. All right, let's get into today's story, because this story is about to change the way you think about silence. And if you have ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better, this one is for you. They say the most dangerous person in any room is the one no one is watching. Today, I want to tell you a story, not from a Korean village with lanterns and rice paddies, not from Seoul's neon underground, but from a city that glitters so hard it forgets the dark underneath it. Houston, Texas, the wealthiest city in the American South, a city of old oil money, new tech money, and a criminal underworld so elegantly dressed you would never find it unless it wanted to be found. This is not a story about a woman who cried. This is about a woman who calculated. Her name was Imani Seo, née Imani Grace Okafor, 34 years old, born in Atlanta to a Nigerian father and a Black American mother who taught high school chemistry and never wasted a single ingredient. Imani had her father's patience and her mother's precision. She had moved to Houston at 26 for graduate school, interior architecture, and had built, in the years since, one of the most respected luxury design firms in the state. Her clients were oil executives, real estate developers, the kind of people whose names appeared on buildings. She was brilliant, polished, and she laughed like she meant it. Her husband was Seo Jun-ho, 41. The publicly known version of him was elegant and simple. CEO of SEO Capital Holdings, a private equity firm with offices in Houston's Galleria district. He drove a matte black Genesis G90 with plates that simply read SEO. He wore bespoke suits from a Korean tailor who flew to Houston twice a year just to fit him. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and rearranged it without touching a single piece of furniture. what almost nobody in Houston knew, and what Imani had been told only in pieces. The way you tell someone about a deep wound without showing them the whole scar was that Seo Junho was the silent operational head of the Seo Syndicate, the oldest Korean criminal organization west of Los Angeles. Gambling dens layered beneath legitimate hospitality businesses, protection networks embedded in Houston's Koreatown, money laundering routed through a chain of high-end Korean barbecue restaurants, and a real estate holding company that acquired distressed properties at remarkable speed. The FBI had a file. The file had photographs. None of them were enough. Junho was too careful, too clean on paper, too charming in person. They had been married 5 years. They had a daughter, Hana, 4 years old. She had Imani's dark eyes and Junho's jawline, and she called her father Appa and her mother Mommy with the same ferocity. On the surface, they were extraordinary. The kind of couple that made people lower their voices at dinner parties and say, "You know who I saw at the gala last week?" But Imani had not been truly happy in 2 years. She had told herself every marriage had seasons, that the distance between them was just the weight of a man who carried too much, that when Junho stopped reaching for her at night, it was exhaustion, that when his phone began sleeping face down on the nightstand like a secret keeping itself, it was nothing. She told herself stories, beautiful, comfortable stories, until the Tuesday of the laptop. It was ordinary in every way a Tuesday can be ordinary. Imani's MacBook Pro had crashed in the middle of a presentation, a mood board for a penthouse redesign on Buffalo Speedway, the most expensive residential corridor in Houston. Her client was waiting. Junho had already left for the office. His personal laptop, not the work one, the personal one, sat on his side of the bed, charging quietly like it had nothing to hide. She had used it before. He had never said a word. She carried it to the kitchen island, opened it. His wallpaper was a photo of the 3 of them, Jeju Island, 2 summers ago. Hana had been 2, round-cheeked and furious about the wind. Junho had been laughing so hard his sunglasses had slid down his nose. Imani remembered that afternoon. She had felt for a moment completely at peace. She smiled at the photograph. Then she opened a new browser window to access her cloud files. The browser's recent tabs appeared, and one of them, the last one opened, stopped her hand entirely. It was a Google Doc. The preview title visible in the tab read, ISG Dissolution, Phase 2, Final Review, ISG, Imani Seo Grace, her full name, her initials. Open it. Don't open it. Open it. She clicked. It was not 7 pages. It was 11, formatted with the cold precision of a man who ran operations for a living. There were sections, headers, subpoints beneath the headers. It was not a draft. It was a plan in its final stage. Section 1, Asset Separation. A breakdown of every jointly held asset. The River Oaks estate, the investment portfolio, the offshore accounts Imani barely knew existed. Next to each asset was a column labeled Proposed Allocation and another labeled Status. Several lines had the word Complete beside them, in green text. Complete. He had already started. Section 2, Legal Framework. At the top, a note that read, Confirm with Daniel Park, re Texas Community Property Exceptions, Spousal Business Interest Clause. Daniel Park. She knew that name. He was Junho's personal attorney, a man who had once brought them wine at a dinner party and told Imani she had wonderful taste. Section 3, The Child. There it was. Hana Seo, primary custody proposed to father, rationale, mother's business travel schedule, lack of Korean cultural immersion for child. Lack of Korean cultural immersion. She read the line 3 times. And she had taught Hana to count to 10 in Yoruba and in Korean simultaneously. She had bought Hana a hanbok for Chuseok and braided her hair with cowrie shells for Kwanzaa and called it what it was, a child who belonged to everywhere, lack of Korean cultural immersion. And then, at the bottom of section 3, a handwritten note, photographed and inserted into the document in Junho's precise architectural script. She will fight for the child. Let her. By then, the accounts will be restructured. She will have nothing to fight with. Imani set the laptop down. She picked it back up. She photographed every single page with her phone, quietly, steadily. Her hand did not shake, not once, and she would think about that later. She would think about what it meant that her hand did not shake. Then she closed the document. To close the laptop, placed it back on his side of the bed exactly as she had found it. Charging cable coiled the same way, screen angled the same degree. She went back downstairs. She finished the mood board on her phone. She sent it to the client. Then she sat at the kitchen island in the silence of her River Oaks home. 12,000 square feet, a chef's kitchen, a wine cellar, a garden Imani had designed herself with jasmine, an agapanthus because she refused to live somewhere that did not smell alive. And she opened her notes app. She typed one word, plan. Here is what you need to understand about Imani Grace Okafor Co. before we go any further. She grew up watching her father, Dr. Chukwuemeka Okafor. Emeka, to his colleagues, and chief to anyone who truly respected him, had come to Atlanta from Enugu with $40 and a chemistry degree and had built, over 30 years, a biomedical consulting firm that did business in 7 countries. He had taught Imani 3 things before she turned 10. First, information is the only currency that cannot be inflated. Second, the person who appears to be losing is often the person who chose when the game would end. Third, never let them see you learning. Her mother, Dr. Carolyn Grace, who had taught high school chemistry for 22 years before running for state legislature and winning on her first attempt, had added one more thing when Imani left for Houston. Baby, the most powerful thing you can do to someone who underestimates you is let them keep doing it. Pumped until you're done. Imani Seo had been underestimated her entire married life, not crudely, not in ways she could point to and say, there, that was it. It was the kind of underestimation that wore a beautiful face. It looked like Junho managing all their joint finances because he was better with numbers. It looked like him introducing her at syndicate-adjacent dinners as my wife. She does interiors. As though the firm that had grossed $4 million the previous year was a hobby she had assembled in an afternoon. It looked like the way his mother, Mrs. Seo Myung-ja, called Imani the American, even after 5 years of marriage and a grandchild, and Junho laughed and called it affectionate. Imani had smiled and catalogued every single moment and said nothing. She was saying something now, and the first call she made was not to a lawyer. It was to her accountant, a woman named Brenda Cole, CPA, with an office in Midtown Houston and a reputation for being discreet and devastating in equal measure. Imani called her under the pretense of Q3 tax reviews for Imani Seo Interiors LLC. While they reviewed quarterly filings, Imani asked a single careful question. Brenda, hypothetically, if a business co-registered under 2 names needed to remove 1 signatory, and we needed it done without triggering a filing flag, how long would that take? Brenda was quiet for 3 seconds. Come in Thursday, she said. Bring your original LLC formation documents and your personal EIN, not the joint one. Imani brought everything. By the following Tuesday, Imani Seo Interiors LLC had been formally restructured. Junho's name, which had been listed as a silent co-owner for tax optimization purposes, something he had insisted on 3 years ago, was removed. The restructuring was clean, documented, entirely legal. The business was hers alone. It took 8 days. He never noticed. Why would he? He had called it her little design thing at a dinner party the previous spring. His lawyer had laughed. Her little design thing had grossed $4.3 million in the 12 months prior. Next came the accounts. Their joint investment account held $340,000. Imani knew most of it had come from her business income. 2 years of discipline, of paying herself a modest salary, and rooting the rest into what she had believed was their shared future. She did not touch it immediately. She was too careful for that. Instead, she set up transaction alerts and watched, and what she watched over the next 2 weeks made her understand something she had suspected but not confirmed. Jun-ho had not decided to leave her recently. This had been in motion for months. Small transfers first, $8,000, $12,000. Routed to an account she did not recognize. Not his operational account, not the business account she knew about. A third account. She ran the routing number through her father's banking contacts in Atlanta. The account was registered to a shell company called Hana Holdings, LLC. Hana. He had named the account after their daughter. She felt something move through her chest at that. Not hot, not angry. Something colder. Something that sharpened rather than scattered. Imani began moving money. Small, invisible amounts. Into a personal account at a credit union in the 3rd Ward that Jun-ho had never visited, had never had reason to visit, would never think to look. $12,000. 8,000. 15. Over 3 weeks, she recovered $178,000 of what was rightfully hers. The remaining $60,000 she left. She had plans for it. Then there was the phone. She had known Jun-ho's passcode for years. Hana's birthday, month, and year. The way he always used numbers that meant something because he said random numbers were for people who had nothing real to protect. He had never changed it. She waited for the right moment. It came on a Saturday. They were hosting a small dinner, 4 couples, all deep within the edges of Jun-ho's world. Men who laughed too loudly at things that weren't funny, and whose wives wore the specific smile of women who had learned to occupy space without taking it. Imani was in the kitchen. Jun-ho was in the garden with the men. His phone lay on the kitchen counter. Face up, playing a playlist through the Bluetooth speaker. She had 4 minutes. It was worse than the laptop. The contact name was Ji-young, saved with a small white flower emoji. The messages went back 2.5 years. Not months. Years. There were photographs. There were voice notes that Imani did not play but whose timestamps she photographed. There were messages that mapped the shape of another life Jun-ho had been building in parallel, a condominium in Midtown that Imani had assumed was an investment property, in dinner reservations at restaurants she had suggested to him. And he had called too far, a conversation from 11 months ago in which Ji-young had written, "When are you going to handle it? I've been patient, Jun-ho." And he had written back, "Soon. Everything is being positioned. When I move, it will be clean. She won't see it coming. She won't see it coming." Imani photographed every significant message. She put the phone back on the counter, adjusted the angle by 2 degrees to match where it had been, and walked back to the dining room where she spent the next 3 hours being the most luminous version of herself, laughing, pouring wine, charming every person at that table. While Jun-ho watched her from the head of the table with the quiet satisfaction of a man who believed he controlled everything. There is a particular kind of intelligence that lives in women who have been underestimated. It does not announce itself. It simply works. The following Monday, Imani made an appointment with an attorney named Margaret Osei, a Ghanaian-American family law partner, at one of Houston's oldest firms, a woman who had been quietly recommended by 3 different women in Imani's network, when Imani had asked carefully who handled complex high-asset divorces involving international holdings. They met in a corner office on the 32nd floor of a building downtown. "My husband and I own a property together," Imani said. "Among other things, I want to understand exactly what my rights are." Margaret Osei leaned forward and folded her hands. "Tell me everything." She said, the River Oaks estate had been purchased 5 years ago for $2.8 million. Jun Ho had handled the transaction. His name was primary on the deed. But when Margaret obtained the original purchase documentation, she found something that made her pause and reach for her notepad. The down payment, $700,000, had come from a wire transfer originating from an Atlanta account belonging to Dr. Chukwuemeka Okafor, Imani's father. "He insisted," Imani said quietly. "He said it was his gift, that no daughter of his would begin a marriage without equity. Jun Ho accepted it. He was gracious about it. Did your father sign anything assigning that contribution as a gift to your husband?" "No." "Did anyone ask him to?" "No." Margaret was quiet for a moment that felt like a calculation completing itself. "And then we file a declaration of equitable interest," she said. "We establish that the down payment constitutes your family's financial stake in the property, combined with proof that your business income funded a significant portion of the subsequent mortgage payments, which I'm assuming it did. Yes. We establish your primary financial claim to no less than 70% of the asset's current value. We cannot sell without his consent, but we can ensure that when this property is liquidated, and given his financial behavior, it will be, your claim is first in line and primary." Imani met with a property appraiser that week. The River Oaks estate had appreciated to $4.1 million. 70% was $2.87 million. She filed the equitable interest claim through Margaret's office, and Jun Ho would receive notice, eventually. Probably at the same time he received everything else. That evening, Imani called her father from the bathroom of her River Oaks home, with the shower running loud enough that no recording device in any room could have caught her words. "Daddy," she said, "do you remember the wire you sent when we bought the house?" A pause, then her father's voice, measured, unhurried, the voice of a man who understood immediately. "I remember every transaction I have ever made," he said. "I am a detail person, Imani. I keep records. I also never signed a single document transferring ownership of that money to anyone other than you." She didn't explain anything further. She didn't need to. "Come to Atlanta this weekend," Chief Okafor said. "Bring Hana. And I have some old documents in my filing cabinet I've been meaning to organize." He paused. "Take care of yourself, my daughter. And remember what I taught you. The one who appears to be losing is often the one who chose when the game would end." Imani had documented evidence of primary financial contribution to the River Oaks property through her father's wire transfer. She had bank records proving her business income as the main funder of their joint investment account. She had transaction records showing Jun Ho's systematic withdrawal into Hana Holdings, LLC, deliberate asset dissipation ahead of a planned separation. She had 2.5 years of message screenshots proving the affair. She had the photograph dissolution document. And she had one more thing. "Chun, do you remember the note in Jun Ho's document? Confirm with Daniel Park, Rigi spousal business interest clause?" Imani knew Daniel Park. She also knew Daniel Park's wife, Sandra Park, née Sandra Mensah, a Ghanaian-American woman who had met Daniel at a law school mixer and married him in a ceremony that Imani had helped design. They were not close friends, but they were friendly. The kind of friendly built in the specific ecosystem of Houston's small Black and Korean social overlap. Charity galas, private school fundraisers, gallery openings. Sandra had seemed tired at the last gala, the specific tired that has nothing to do with sleep. 3 weeks after the laptop, Imani found herself standing beside Sandra at a charity auction in the museum district, and they were looking at the same piece, an abstract work in deep indigo and gold. "You okay?" Imani asked quietly. Sandra smiled the way women do when they are absorbing rather than feeling. "Marriage things," she said. Imani was quiet for a moment. "If you ever need to talk," she said. "I mean really talk. I'm here." Sandra looked at her for a long moment. "Same," she said. "Any time." 2 weeks later, Sandra called. Her voice was low and careful, and it was the voice of a woman who had been holding something for too long and had finally decided to set it down. "Imani, I saw a file on Daniel's desk, a client named Seo. I wasn't going to call, but there are things in that file that you need to know. Are you okay?" "Sandra," Imani said. "I am very okay. Actually, I am better than I have been in 2 years." A pause. "How long has she been coming to the Midtown apartment?" The silence from Sandra's end was long enough to confirm everything that silence can confirm. "How did you know about the apartment?" Sandra finally asked. "Because," Imani said gently, "we are in the same story. We just haven't compared notes yet." They talked for 2 hours. At the end of the call, Sandra quietly agreed that if the situation ever required a witness, someone who had seen documents, heard conversations, noticed things, she would be available. Imani filed that away carefully. Margaret Osei filed everything else. For 3 months, from the Tuesday of the laptop to the morning everything ended, Imani Seo performed the role of devoted wife, with the kind of precision that only a woman fully in control of the outcome can sustain. She made his doenjang jiggy on Sundays. She attended his associates' dinners and charmed the room. She laughed at the right moments. She wore the white dress he loved to his firm's anniversary gala and was so radiant that his business partner leaned over to Junho and said quietly, "That woman is extraordinary." "You are the luckiest man in this building," Junho had smiled. Imani, standing across the room with a glass of champagne, had watched him smile, and she had smiled back. Meanwhile, she was finishing everything. She had begun building the exit long before she needed it, though she hadn't known that at the time. 18 months prior, she had developed a remote consultancy arrangement with a Chicago-based interior architecture firm with offices in New York and Atlanta. She had maintained the relationship carefully, professionally, the way her mother had always said to maintain every bridge, because you never know which river gets wide. She researched schools in Atlanta, the city she had left at 26. The city her parents still called home. She found a school. She toured it virtually on a Wednesday morning while Junho was at his office, and Hana sat beside her eating yogurt. "What are those children doing, Mommy? Learning, baby?" "Can I learn there?" "You might." Hana went back to her yogurt. Imani had quietly opened a personal account at a black-owned credit union in Atlanta's West End. She had moved money carefully. She had had one conversation with her father about his safe and its contents that neither of them would ever need to reference aloud again. But there was one thing left, the hardest thing. She drafted an email from an address Junho did not know existed to a family mediator named Dr. Patricia Bloom, a specialist in high-asset collaborative separation. "I want it documented that I attempted resolution," Imani told her, "before this becomes what it is going to become." The email to Junho was measured. Subject line, "Proposal for Hana's well-being." In it, she outlined a parenting plan. She would be relocating to Atlanta for a significant career expansion. Hana would come with her. Junho would have Hana for all major holidays, every school break, all summers. video calls 4 times a week. She had included flight cost projections and a proposed schedule. She had and C'd Dr. Bloom. She waited 72 hours. Jun-ho did not reply, not even about his daughter. Dr. Bloom documented the non-response. This establishes willful disengagement from parental responsibility, she said. Keep this documentation. It matters. Imani kept everything. She was ready. She was simply waiting for him to give her the opening. It came on a Thursday morning at 6:09 a.m. Jun-ho was sitting on the edge of their bed when she opened her eyes, dressed already, cologne on. Watching her with the expression of a man who had rehearsed what he was about to say so many times, it had worn grooves in him. Imani. His voice was careful, measured, the voice he used in rooms where he controlled every outcome. I need to speak with you about something important. She sat up slowly. I have been thinking for a long time about us, he said, about where we are, and about what is honest. He paused, a pause so perfectly placed it confirmed the rehearsal. I don't think we are giving each other what we need anymore. I think we should end the marriage. Silence. Imani looked at him. He looked back, braced, coiled, waiting for the thing he had planned for. Tears. Volume. Something to manage. She said, "Okay." He went completely still. "Okay?" "Yes." Her voice was so calm it changed the temperature of the room. "I understand, Jun-ho. A person cannot manufacture happiness. If this is what you feel, I accept it. I am not going to beg you." She let one breath pass. "Give me 3 weeks to organize my affairs, then we proceed however the legal process requires." He stared at her for a long time. 3 weeks, he repeated. 3 weeks, she confirmed. She lay back down, pulled the duvet to her shoulder. "Close the door when you leave." Please." He stood in the doorway for 10 seconds. The 10 seconds of a man whose script has just dissolved in his hands. Then he left. Imani lay in the dark of her River Oaks bedroom. Her heart was moving fast, not from fear, from the specific electricity of a woman who has just been handed permission to finish what she already started. 3 weeks. That was what she had asked for. That was what he had agreed to. Relieved, if she was honest, that she had not screamed, had not thrown things, had not called his mother or summoned a scene. He had walked out of that bedroom believing he had handled it well, believing the difficult part was over. He had no idea the difficult part had already been over for 3 months. He had no idea the difficult part had been her, sitting across from him at dinner, sleeping beside him in that bed, and ironing his shirts, attending his dinners, performing a marriage that had already been quietly, methodically, surgically dissolved on paper, while he thought he was the only one planning. Jun-ho Seo had spent 2.5 years believing he was the most prepared person in the room. He had spent those same 2.5 years living with the one person on earth who was more prepared than him. He just never thought to look. In the first week, Imani moved like water, not frantically, not dramatically, with the specific efficiency of a woman who has had 3 months to map every step and is now simply walking the path she already built. On Monday morning, the same morning Jun-ho went to his office with the ease of a man who believed the hard conversation was behind him. Imani sat in Margaret Osie's corner office on the 32nd floor and finalized everything. The equitable interest claim on the River Oaks estate was airtight. Her father's $700,000 wire transfer, documented, uncontested, no assignment of ownership ever signed. Her business income as the primary mortgage contributor. 2 years of bank statements, every transfer time-stamped and traceable. Jun-ho's $178,000 in outgoing transfers to Hana Holdings LLC, documented as deliberate pre-separation asset dissipation. The affair evidence. the dissolution document photographs, Sandra Park's willingness to testify. This is one of the most comprehensively prepared cases I have seen walk through that door, Margaret said, and she was not a woman who gave compliments carelessly. I had time, Imani said. Margaret filed everything that afternoon. The legal notices would be dispatched at a time of Imani's choosing. That time was not yet. Tuesday, Imani called Brenda Cole. The joint investment account, what remained of it after June Ho's withdrawals and Imani's careful recoveries, held $62,000. Imani transferred it in 3 movements across 2 days. Clean, legal. Into the credit union account in Atlanta's West End that June Ho did not know existed, had never had reason to know existed, would not think to look for even if he thought to look. The joint account now held $0. She also, with the quiet efficiency of someone crossing items off a list they have been carrying for months, contacted a private auto broker in Houston's Galleria district. A woman named Renee, who had sold Imani her white Range Rover 3 years ago, and who understood discretion the way some people understand a second language, fluently and without being asked. I need to move the car quickly, Imani said. Private sale, fair market, not retail. When? End of the week. I have a buyer already. Give me 2 days. The white Range Rover, which June Ho had glanced at 2 weeks ago when Imani mentioned it was at the detailer, and responded with the half-attention of a man who had ceased to register the details of his wife's life, sold on Friday for $87,000. Paid in full. Wire transfer received by close of business. June Ho never asked about the car again. Why would he? It was just a car. It was just her car. It was just her money. And everything she owned had been just something to him. Her business was just her design thing. Her car was just a car. Her opinions at dinner were just her talking. Her silence in recent months had been just her being quiet. He had looked at the whole of her and seen the surface and called it the depth. That was his mistake. That had always been his mistake. In the second week, she packed. Not everything. She had thought about this carefully. The way her mother had taught her to think about chemistry problems, identify what is essential, remove what is reactive, and never waste a single component. Documents first. Every document that mattered. Hannah's birth certificate, Hannah's passport, Hannah's medical records, their marriage certificate, her own passport, her business registration, her father's financial records, her MBA certificate, and the drive containing 5 years of her design portfolio. She had been moving these incrementally for 3 weeks already. Small transfers, a folder here, an envelope to her father's Atlanta address there. By the time the second week arrived, the documents were already gone. Then Hannah's things. She did it in the morning while Hannah was at preschool, and June Ho was at his office. She packed Hannah's clothes with the focus of a woman who knows exactly how much childhood weighs, and is unwilling to leave a single piece of it behind. The soft toys, the handbook, and the Ankara dress. The book of Korean folk tales Imani had read to Hannah every Thursday night, and the book of Yoruba proverbs her father had sent from Atlanta with a note that read, "For my granddaughter, who belongs to all of us." And she packed the cowrie shell bracelet Hannah's grandmother, Imani's mother, had made for her the week she was born. She left Hannah's drawings on the wall of her bedroom. She would take photographs of them and have them reprinted in Atlanta. She was not sentimental about objects. She was precise about what mattered. Her grandmother's jewelry, her design portfolio drives, her laptop, the clothes she actually loved, not all of them, just the ones she had chosen herself before June Ho began occasionally suggesting what she should wear to his events. She was leaving a life, not a wardrobe. She moved everything in pieces across 12 days, a bag to her college friend Adaizi's house in Sugarland, in a box driven by Adaz, who asked zero questions because she was the kind of friend who understood that zero questions was sometimes the most loving thing, to a shipping company in the 3rd Ward, who dispatched it to an Atlanta storage unit in Imani's name. Junho never walked into a room and noticed it was lighter. Why would he? He had not been paying attention to the weight of things for 2 years. What remained in the River Oaks estate when Imani was finished packing was precise. The built-in appliances, those belonged to the house, and she left them. The television mounted in the living room, too much trouble, she left it. The furniture Junho had purchased with his own taste, the cold minimalist pieces he had chosen without asking her, she left those too. What she took was everything that had made the house hers, and the custom throw pillows she had designed herself, the art she had curated and hung over 5 years, the hand-knotted Moroccan rug in the master bedroom that she had bought in Marrakech on a solo sourcing trip, and that Junho had once described as interesting, the jasmine plant from the kitchen windowsill that she had grown from a cutting her mother had given her. The kitchen was bare of everything that had made it alive. The living room held only the mounted television and the architecture of empty space. Hana's bedroom, completely bare. Every piece of pink and gold, every drawing on the corkboard, every small shoe, every stuffed animal, every piece of a 4-year-old's world, gone. She left Junho's side of the house untouched. His suits hung in the wardrobe, his watches on the nightstand, his bespoke Tom Ford fragrance on the bathroom shelf, his laptop on the study desk, his things, every one of his things, exactly where he had left them. She wanted him to understand the specific geometry of what had happened. She wanted him to walk through a house where his things were intact and everything else was gone, and feel the precise shape of what it meant to lose someone who had been keeping everything alive. She left the family photographs on the wall. Every framed photograph from 5 years of Seo family social media, Jeju Island, the Maldives, Hana's first birthday, the gala where Junho's business partner had called Imani extraordinary. She left them all hanging. Let him look at them, she thought. Or let him look at the face of a woman who was smiling in every single frame, and understand that behind each smile was a woman who saw him clearly, and chose, for as long as she needed to let him believe she didn't. In the 3rd week, she converted. Quietly and without drama, she moved $210,000, drawn from her business accounts, her personal recovery transfers, and the car sale, into an international wire routed to her Atlanta credit union. Legal, clean, documented as business income distribution and personal asset liquidation, both of which it was. She also, on a Wednesday morning that felt like any other Wednesday morning, called her father. He answered on the first ring. "I'm ready, Daddy." "I know," he said. "Come home." She flew to Atlanta the following Saturday with Hana, officially a weekend visit to see her parents, and the kind of visit she made every 2 or 3 months, the kind that would not register as anything unusual to anyone watching. Junho was hosting a private dinner that Saturday. He kissed her cheek when she left. He told Hana to be good for her grandparents. He looked at neither of them long enough to see what he was looking at. In her father's study in Buckhead, a room that smelled of old books and fresh coffee and the particular safety of a man who had never once in her life let her down. Imani sat across from Chief Okafor, and they went through the documents together. Her father's original wire receipt, stamped and notarized. 3 years of bank statements, the dissolution document photographs, Margaret Osie's filed claims. Her father looked at everything carefully. Then he closed the folder, set it on his desk. Bunin looked at his daughter for a long moment. "Your mother," he said, "would not be surprised by a single page of this. I know. She would be proud." Imani's eyes burned. She did not cry. Almost, but not quite. She had time for that later, when everything was finished, and she was somewhere quiet, and it was only her and the truth of what she had survived. Not yet. "I have one more thing," her father said. He opened the safe behind his desk. He removed a single envelope, thick, sealed, with Imani's full name written in his handwriting across the front. "Your mother and I prepared this when you got married. We hoped you would never need it, but we prepared it because we are detail people." She opened it on the flight back to Houston. Inside was a 4-page notarized document, drafted by her father's attorney 5 years prior, establishing that the $700,000 wire transfer made at the time of the River Oaks property purchase constituted a conditional gift held in trust for Imani Grace Okafor Seo. Explicitly, not a gift to the marital estate. Explicitly not subject to division in the event of dissolution. Her parents had prepared an exit for her before she knew she would need one. She thought about that for the entire flight home. She thought about her mother, Dr. Carolyn Grace, who had taught high school chemistry for 22 years and believed that every reaction had a preparation phase, and that the preparation phase was always the one that mattered. And she pressed her fingers to her eyes behind her sunglasses and let 3 tears fall, quietly, in the window seat while Hannah slept against her shoulder. Just 3. Then she put the document in her carry-on. Sun straightened her posture and looked out the window at the city below coming into focus. She was going back to finish it. On Sunday of the 3rd week, Jun-ho announced he had business in New York. 4 days. He was leaving Monday. "Okay," Imani said. "Safe travels." He left at 5:45 a.m. on Monday. She watched his Genesis G90 pull out of the driveway from the upstairs window. She watched until the gate hummed shut behind him. Then she turned around. "Hannah," she called. Her daughter appeared in the hallway in her pajamas, her dark eyes sleep-soft, her hair in 2 puffs that Imani had braided loosely the night before. "Yes, Mommy. Go put on your purple dress, baby. The one with the stars. Are we going somewhere?" "Yes." "Where?" Imani crouched down to her daughter's height. She took Hannah's face in both hands. "We are going somewhere with really good ice cream." Hannah's eyes went wide. "What flavor? All the flavors." Hannah considered this with the gravity of a 4-year-old making a genuinely important decision. "Okay," she said. "Let's go." By 11 a.m. on Monday, the last boxes had been loaded into the rented cargo van that Adaz drove, still asking 0 questions, still being the most loving kind of friend, to the shipping company in the 3rd Ward. By 1 p.m., Imani and Hannah were at George Bush Intercontinental Airport. Hannah wore her purple star dress and her favorite light-up sneakers and carried the small backpack shaped like a bear that she called Bear Bear. And she held Imani's hand through security and through the terminal and pointed at every single thing that interested her, which was everything. Because she was 4 years old and the world was still entirely made of wonder. Imani held her daughter's hand and watched her and felt, underneath the controlled precision of everything she had been holding for 3 months, a wave of something so large and so clean it nearly stopped her in the middle of the terminal. Freedom, she thought. This is what it feels like before it has a name. Their gate appeared ahead. Imani looked at the departure board. Atlanta, Georgia. On time. She picked up Hannah. She walked through the gate. She did not look back. Jun-ho returned from New York on Thursday evening. He was in a good mood. New York had been productive. Ji Young had flown up Wednesday. He had told Imani he had client dinners both nights, and Imani had responded with a voice note. "Sounds good. And travel safe." And the 2 of them had spent 36 hours in a midtown hotel that he paid for in cash through a channel he had established specifically for this purpose. Because he was a careful man. because he had spent his entire adult life being a careful man, because careful was how you survived in the world he moved through. He was careful about everything, except the one thing that had mattered most. He took a car from the airport. As they turned onto his street in River Oaks, the street with the houses set back from the road behind old oak trees, the street that said, "You have arrived," in the specific language of Houston wealth. He felt something he could not immediately name. The house looked the same from outside. The gate, the garden, the jasmine climbing the east wall. Imani's jasmine, the one she had grown from a cutting, and the one she tended on Sunday mornings in old clothes, with her hair pinned up, the one that filled the whole side of the house with a sweetness that hit you before you even reached the door. He noticed vaguely that her Range Rover was not in the driveway. He remembered vaguely that it was at the detailer. He paid the driver. He walked to the front door. His key worked. He pushed it open. The house was empty, not ransacked, not destroyed, not dramatic in any of the ways he had half imagined during the months he had been planning. The screaming, the thrown things, the scene that would have confirmed for him that she was the unstable one, the difficult one, the one who had made this necessary. Just empty, the kind of empty that is its own statement. The living room held the mounted television and the ghost of furniture. On the walls held the photograph frames, every curated image from 5 years of their life together. Jeju Island, the Maldives, Hannah's first birthday, the gala, Seo family smiling in every frame, the images of a life so perfectly constructed it had looked from the outside like a fact rather than a performance. He stood in the middle of the empty living room and looked at the photographs for a long time. The kitchen, bare. The appliances remained, built-in, bolted, belonging to the house. But the handmade ceramic bowls she had brought back from a sourcing trip to Oaxaca were gone. The herbs she grew on the windowsill were gone. The yellow dish towels she had embroidered with small flowers, because she said she refused to have ugly dish towels, gone. The kitchen was just a room now, just walls and surfaces and built-in machinery. Nothing that said anyone had ever cooked anything in it that mattered. He walked to Hannah's room. He stood in the doorway for a moment he would not be able to measure later. Gone, every piece of pink and gold, every drawing on the corkboard, every small sneaker, every stuffed animal, every artifact of his daughter's small, specific, irreplaceable life. Gone. What remained was a bare room with pale walls and the faint ghost of sticker adhesive near the light switch where Hannah had placed, over Imani's mild objection, a line of star stickers at exactly the height of her 4-year-old reach. He stood there for 10 seconds. Then he walked to the study. On the desk, centered with the precision of someone who measures intention, were 3 documents. The first was a legal notice from Margaret Osei and Associates, attorneys at law, one informing Seo Jun-ho that his wife Imani Grace Seo, née Okafor, had formally initiated dissolution proceedings, had reverted to her name Imani Grace Okafor, and had relocated with their daughter Hannah Seo to Atlanta, Georgia, where she was establishing primary residence. It referenced the parenting proposal email sent 23 days prior, documented by mediator Dr. Patricia Bloom, noting his failure to respond. All custody and financial matters would be handled through legal representation. All communication to be directed to Margaret Osei's office. The second was the equitable interest claim on the River Oaks property. He stared at the figure. 70%. He read his father-in-law's name. He read the notarized document. He read the words, "Conditional gift held in trust for Imani Grace Okafor Seo," or explicitly not subject to division in the event of dissolution, and he felt something move through him that was new, something he did not have an immediate name for. The third document was a single page. It was a 6-month transaction history of the joint investment account. Every outgoing transfer to Hana Holdings LLC was highlighted in yellow. His own handwriting, Hana Holdings LLC, stared back at him from the account registration line at the top. He had named a shell company after his daughter to hide money from his wife. That document, he understood immediately, would be used to establish deliberate asset dissipation in a Texas court. Texas, which took a deeply unfavorable view of spouses who systematically drained marital accounts in anticipation of separation. He reached for his phone. He went to the joint investment account. On balance, $0. He went to the business co-registration for Imani CO Interiors LLC. Access denied. You are not authorized on this account. He called Imani's number. The number you have dialed is not available. Please try again later. He tried again. The number you have dialed. He called Adaz. Adaz answered on the second ring with the unhurried ease of a woman who had been waiting for exactly this call and had decided in advance how she would handle it. Adaz, where is Imani? Where is my wife? Where is Hana? Her voice was warm, patient, and completely immovable. She is not your wife anymore, Junho. You decided that. She simply agreed. A pause. Hana is safe, healthy, and happy. That is all you need to know right now. She hung up. Junho sat down on the floor of his empty study. He sat for a long time, and then he got up and walked through the house, slowly, room by room, the way you check the perimeter of something you are trying to understand. The living room, the kitchen, Hana's room, their bedroom, his things untouched, her side of the wardrobe empty except for 3 wire hangers. The bathroom, his cologne on the shelf, her side of the vanity bare. He came back to the living room. He stood in the center of the empty space and looked at the photographs on the wall. 5 years of a life. 5 years of a woman smiling in every frame. At galas, on beaches, in the delivery room with a newborn Hana on her chest, and the most luminous exhaustion he had ever seen on a human face. He looked at that photograph for a long time. Then he bent down and picked up the thing he had almost missed, tucked under the edge of the sofa. A piece of printer paper and crayon. He turned it over. 4 stick figures. 1 tall, 1 medium, 1 small, one that might have been a dog, or might have been a very ambitious attempt at a cat. Above them, in Hana's 4-year-old handwriting, slanting and determined, my family. He sat down on the floor of the living room and held his daughter's drawing and said nothing to the empty house. He called Ji Young. The phone rang 4 times. He was already composing the words, "Come to River Oaks. Bring things. We will figure this out from here." The words of a man who still believed that because he had been the one planning, he must still be the one with a plan. The call cut. He called again. 2 rings, cut. He texted instead. Ji Young was in her midtown condo when his name appeared on her screen. She let it ring. She let it ring again. She set the phone face down on her kitchen counter and looked out the window at the Houston skyline. All glass and steel, and the specific ambition of a city that moves too fast to look backward. She thought about the past 2.5 years, the patience she had exercised, the careful positioning, the "I'm going to handle it soon, just trust me." The dissolution document he had shown her 8 months ago as proof. Look, Ji Young, this is real. This is happening. And she had felt, looking at those pages, the particular thrill of a woman who believed she was about to inherit something. She had believed she was winning. She had believed that Ada, that Imani, sweet, composed, professional Imani with her design firm and her jasmine plant, and her way of making every room she walked into feel intentional, was a woman who did not see what was coming. Her friend Mira had called that afternoon. Girl, You know about your boy Jun-ho? A pause full of the specific relish of someone delivering news they have been sitting on for an hour. His wife cleaned him out. The house is legally compromised. The accounts are zeroed. She took Hana to Atlanta. He is done. Ji-young had laughed at first. A reflex. Imani. That same Imani. Apparently she found out months ago and said absolutely nothing. Just planned everything. His lawyer's wife helped her. Ji-young had stopped laughing. She sat with that for a long time. She had spent 2.5 years waiting for a man to dismantle his life so she could step into it. To the River Oaks estate, the Genesis G90, the syndicate-adjacent invitations, the life she had imagined from the outside, clean and powerful and inevitable. But there was no estate anymore. There was a legally compromised property with a 70% equitable interest claim in another woman's name. There were no accounts. There was no life to step into, just a man who had been outmaneuvered by the woman he had spent 2 years failing to see. Ji-young was not interested in inheriting a man's wreckage. She had not invested 2.5 years to receive nothing. She picked up the phone. She typed, "Jun-ho, I can't do this. I heard what happened. I'm sorry. I can't." She hit send. She blocked his number. Then she opened her contacts and began scrolling for someone she had been meaning to call for a long time. A corporate attorney she had met at a networking event 6 months ago, before any of this had fully clarified, before she had understood what kind of man she was waiting for. She had chosen Jun-ho because he looked like power. Turned out he had just married it. Jun-ho read the message 3 times. "I can't do this. I heard what happened. I'm sorry. I can't." He set the phone on the floor beside him. He looked around the room, his Tom Ford cologne on the bathroom shelf, visible through the open door, his laptop on the desk, his watches, his Genesis G90 in the driveway, which the finance company would be calling about by end of week, because 3 of the 6 monthly payments were behind, and because Jun-ho Seo had spent like a man who owned the river, while quietly failing to pay for the current. He looked at all of his things, in an empty house that would need to be liquidated, with a first-line equitable interest claim against 70% of its value held by a woman who was at this moment, he was beginning to understand, sitting somewhere with their daughter, and a future he had not factored into his planning, because he had never believed she was planning at all. He had spent 2.5 years believing he was the most prepared person in their marriage. He had lived for those same 2.5 years with the most prepared person he had ever encountered. He had looked at her every day. He had never seen her. And then, quietly, from somewhere in the empty house, he heard it, or thought he heard it, on the faint sweetness of jasmine through a cracked kitchen window. Her plant, the one from her mother's cutting, the one she had left, the only living thing that remained. He sat on the floor of his empty River Oaks home, surrounded by the precise architecture of everything he had lost, and breathed in the scent of the one thing she had chosen not to take. He did not know, could not know, that she had left it on purpose, not out of sentiment, out of precision. She wanted him to remember what it smelled like. She wanted him to know exactly what had been growing in that house all along, quietly, steadily, in the direction of the light, and that he had stood next to it every day and called it a background detail and never once understood that it was the whole garden. Atlanta received her like a city that had been waiting, not with fanfare, and not with the dramatic welcome of someone returning in triumph, arms open, music swelling. Atlanta received Imani the way a good city receives a woman who has been through something real, quietly, with warmth, with the specific grace of a place that has seen enough human resilience to recognize it without needing it explained. Her parents' Buckhead home smelled the same as it always had, old mahogany, and her mother's cooking, and the faint cedar of her father's study, and underneath all of it, something she could only describe as permanence, the smell of a house where someone had been loved unconditionally for so long it had soaked into the walls. Hannah ran straight to her grandfather. Chief Okafor caught her with both arms and swung her in a wide arc that made her shriek with laughter, and Imani stood in the doorway of the house she had grown up in and watched her father hold her daughter and felt something in her chest unhook, slowly, completely, like a coat being lifted from tired shoulders. Her mother appeared from the kitchen doorway. Dr. Carolyn Grace Okafor, 61 years old, state legislator, woman who had once calmly explained to a room full of lobbyists why their amendment was chemically unsound, using nothing but a whiteboard and a calm voice, looked at her daughter for one long moment. Then she opened her arms. Imani walked into them. She did not cry. She had decided that already. She had 3 tears on the plane, and she had decided that was the correct allocation for a woman who had no time to be anything other than what she needed to be right now. Steady, clear, forward-facing. But she held her mother for a long time, and her mother held her back with the particular grip of a woman who understands that sometimes the most powerful thing you can offer another person is simply the certainty that you are not letting go. "You did well," her mother said quietly, into her hair. "I learned from you," Imani said. Her mother made no response to that. She simply held on a moment longer. Then she said, "Dinner is ready," and went back to the kitchen. 3 days later, Imani signed a lease on a townhouse in Atlanta's Virginia Highland neighborhood. 4 bedrooms, a garden, a kitchen with south-facing windows that filled with light from mid-morning until late afternoon. The kind of light that makes cooking feel like an act of abundance rather than obligation. And the previous tenant had left a climbing rose along the back fence that nobody had bothered to remove. Imani looked at it for a long time when the realtor showed her the garden. "I'll take it," she said. She enrolled Hannah in school that same week, a Montessori program in Decatur, diverse and warm, the kind of school where the children grew vegetables in a garden bed outside and called their teachers by first names and were encouraged to ask every question that occurred to them, without apology. Hannah's first morning, she wore her purple star dress. She walked through the school gate holding Imani's hand, and then, at the classroom door, turned around with the specific confidence of a child who has never been given a reason to doubt that the world is safe and full of good things. "Okay, Mommy," she said. "You can go now." Imani laughed, a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and unguarded. "Okay, baby," she said. "I'll be here at 3. She walked back to her car in the Decatur morning, cool and bright, the trees beginning their early spring translation from bare to green. And she sat for a moment in the driver's seat with her hands on the wheel and said nothing to no one. Then she opened her notebook. She wrote her new client's name at the top of a fresh page. Below it she wrote, "Budget, vision, timeline." She picked up her phone. She started working. Now. While Imani was building, Jun-ho was unraveling. And here is where the story turns. Because what Imani had understood, and what Jun-ho had catastrophically failed to understand, was that she had not simply been his wife. She had been his balance, not in the soft, a decorative way that word is sometimes used about women in powerful men's lives, in the precise, structural, load-bearing way, in the way that a keystone is not the most visible part of an arch, but is the part that makes every other part possible. In the 5 years of their marriage, Imani had, without being asked, without being credited, without even fully realizing the extent of what she was doing, been the one thing that kept Seo Joon-ho's world from tipping into the thing it was always 2 degrees away from becoming. She had been at every public event where his composure needed softening. She had charmed the partners who found him cold. She had navigated the Houston social world, the galas, the charity boards, the private school networks, with the grace of a woman who genuinely liked people, and in doing so had built a web of goodwill around the Seo name that Joon-ho had benefited from, without ever fully accounting for its source. She had, twice, in ways she had never told anyone, gently redirected conversations at dinner parties that were moving toward questions about Seo Capital Holdings that Joon-ho could not have answered cleanly. She had done it with a laugh and a subject change so natural that the questioner had moved on without ever knowing they had been moved. She had been protecting him, without his knowledge, without his gratitude, without him ever once understanding that the elegant, controlled public face of Seo Joon-ho was 50% built on the specific intelligence of the woman he had spent 2 years planning to discard. Now she was gone, and the arch was beginning to feel its own weight. The first crack appeared 12 days after Imani left. It was small, a dinner, 12 people, a private room at one of Houston's most prestigious Japanese restaurants, a gathering of the kind of men and their partners who could not be seen together in public and therefore chose rooms with no windows. Joon-ho arrived alone. This was noted, not loudly. These were not loud men, but noted with the specific silence of people who track inconsistency the way accountants track variance. "Where is Imani?" asked the wife of the man who controlled distribution across the Gulf Coast. A woman named Helen who had met Imani at 3 previous gatherings, and who always, Joon-ho now recalled, had positioned herself near Imani at every event. "Traveling," Joon-ho said. "Atlanta. Family." Helen nodded once and looked at her husband and said nothing else the entire evening. The dinner was tense in ways Joon-ho could not specifically identify. The warmth that he had always assumed was generated by his own presence, the gravitational pull of a man who commanded rooms, was somehow absent. The conversation moved differently. There were pauses where there had not been pauses before. His business partner Min Jun arrived late and shook Joon-ho's hand with 2 fingers instead of the full palm press that meant everything was stable. 2 fingers. Joon-ho drove home alone in his Genesis G90 through the River Oaks night and told himself it was nothing. It was not nothing. The second crack appeared a week later. His accountant, a meticulous Korean-American man named Theodore, who had managed Seo Capital Holdings books for 6 years, called on a Tuesday morning. "Joon-ho, I need to see you, in person, today if possible." "What is it?" "In person." In Theodore's Galleria office, with the door closed and the blinds turned, Theodore placed 3 documents on the desk between them. "Someone has been asking questions," he said, "about the Hana Holdings transfers. The inquiries are coming from a law firm, Margaret O.C. and Associates. They have filed a formal discovery request in the dissolution proceedings, citing deliberate pre-separation asset dissipation." Joon-ho looked at the documents. "Texas community property law," Theodore continued, in the tone of a man who has rehearsed this and still finds it painful. "Han treats deliberate pre-separation financial depletion as a breach of fiduciary duty between spouses. The discovery request includes 6 months of Hana Holdings, LLC, transaction history." "Joon-ho," he paused, "these transactions are not clean. If this goes before a judge, it won't go before a judge." Theodore looked at him for a long moment. "She has Sandra Park as a witness," he said quietly. "Daniel Park's wife." The room went very still. Joon-ho understood. in the specific cellular way that men who have spent their lives managing information understand things, exactly what that meant. Sandra Park had seen Daniel Park's files. Daniel Park knew everything. And Sandra Park had decided, for reasons that were none of June Ho's business, but every bit of his consequence, to stand with the woman her husband had been helping to dismantle. And he had surrounded himself with careful men. He had not thought to account for the women those careful men went home to. "Fix it," June Ho said. Theodore looked at his desk. "I can limit exposure," he said. "I cannot make the transfers disappear. They are already in Discovery." June Ho said nothing. He drove back to the River Oaks house and sat in the driveway for 11 minutes before going inside. The jasmine was blooming now. He had not planned on noticing it. He noticed it. The third crack was the syndicate. It came not as a confrontation. These were not confrontational men. Confrontation was for people who had no other options, but as a gradual, unmistakable cooling. A meeting rescheduled without a new date offered. An introduction that did not materialize. A message from an intermediary that used language precise enough to be deniable and clear enough to be understood. The principals have concerns about current exposure. They prefer to allow the current situation to resolve before proceeding with Q3 arrangements. Current situation, current exposure. He was the current exposure. For 20 years, Seo Jun Ho had moved through the syndicate's world with the confidence of a man whose personal stability was never in question. He had a wife, he had a family, he had a River Oaks estate and a legitimate business and a social presence that gave every arrangement a surface of clean, domestic respectability. He had a woman who had 3 separate dinner parties, made the right people feel comfortable, without any of them understanding. That was what she was doing. That woman was now in Atlanta with a notebook and a new client and a child enrolled in a Montessori school in Decatur who called her teachers by their first names and grew vegetables in a garden bed. And Seo Jun Ho was standing in the middle of his $4.1 million house, which he could not sell without triggering a 70% equitable interest payment to his wife's family, which he could not afford to maintain on his own income without the $4.3 million annual revenue from a business that was no longer co-registered in his name, holding a message from men who had not survived decades of careful operation by tolerating destabilized partners. He had spent 2.5 years planning a clean exit from his marriage. He had not planned for what the exit would cost him. He had not planned because he had not believed, not truly, that Imani was anything other than a beautiful constant, reliable, warm, present, decorative in all the ways that mattered to a man who had stopped seeing the depth of things. He had planned the dissolution of his marriage the way you plan the removal of wallpaper. He had not understood that she was a load-bearing wall. He called her number. He knew it would not connect. He called it anyway. "The number you have dialed." He sent an email to Margaret Osie's office requesting direct communication with Imani regarding Hana. Margaret's office responded within 4 hours, professionally, precisely, with a proposed video call schedule for Jun Ho's parental contact that had been prepared in advance and required only his signature to activate. It was the schedule Imani had proposed 26 days ago, in the email he had not responded to, and about the daughter he had not asked about. He signed it and sent it back the same afternoon. Hana appeared on his laptop screen that Friday at 6 p.m., Atlanta time per the schedule. In a yellow dress he had never seen, sitting at a kitchen table he did not recognize, with the specific brightness of a child who is entirely okay. "Appa," she said, and waved with both hands. He looked at her for a moment before he could speak. "Hey, Hanaya," he said. "How are you?" "I grew a carrot today," she said. "At school. A real carrot. Can you grow a carrot, Appa?" I don't know. I can teach you," she said generously. It is not that hard. You just put it in dirt. He laughed. It came out ragged, unpolished. Nothing like his usual laugh. Okay, he said. You can teach me. Hannah talked for 12 minutes about the carrot, a boy in her class named Theo who had a dog, the ice cream her grandfather had taken her for, and a book her grandmother was reading to her about a girl who lived by the sea. She did not ask why she was not at home. She did not ask why Mommy was not in the frame. She was 4 years old, and she was in a house that smelled of her grandmother's cooking, and her grandfather caught her when she jumped, and her world was complete. The call ended at 6:13 p.m. Junho closed the laptop. He sat in the silence of the study for a long time, and then, on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after Imani had left, his phone rang with a number from Seoul. His mother, Mrs. Seo Myung-ja, 72 years old, and a woman who had built her own import business after her husband died and raised Junho alone in a 2-room apartment in Mapo-gu and never once complained about any of it, called her son at 9 p.m. Houston time. He answered, Yama Junho. Her voice was not warm and it was not cold. It was the voice of a woman who had made a decision about what she was going to say, and was simply saying it. I spoke with Hannah this morning. Your father-in-law called me. He said nothing. Chief Okafor called me, she continued. He was polite. He was more polite than I would have been. He told me that Imani had relocated with Hannah to Atlanta. He told me that Hannah was well and healthy and happy. He told me that I was welcome to have video calls with my granddaughter on whatever schedule suited me, and that no one was going to use Hannah as a weapon. A pause, and then he said, very quietly, very carefully, that he wanted me to know that his daughter had tried, for 5 years, to be a good wife to my son, and that whatever I thought of the situation, that part was true. Junho was quiet. I called Imani, his mother said. He went still. You called? I called Imani, she answered. We spoke for 40 minutes. Another pause, the pause of a woman measuring her words with the precision of someone who has spent 72 years understanding the cost of saying the wrong thing and the greater cost of not saying the right one. She was gracious. She did not speak badly of you, not once. She told me about Hannah's school and Hannah's carrot, and she told me that you had signed the contact schedule and that I could have Hannah every Sunday morning on video call. Yama, I am not calling to comfort you, Junho. And her voice shifted. Something underneath it now, something old and certain and non-negotiable. I am calling to say one thing. I called her the American for 5 years. I said it the way I would say a category instead of a name. I thought she was a phase, an infatuation you had dressed up as a marriage. I thought she was decorative. A long silence. I was wrong, his mother said, and I was unkind. And I am telling you this because someone needs to say out loud what happened in that house. You had an extraordinary woman. You had a woman who was building something real, who was protecting things you did not know, needed protecting, who was raising your daughter with a richness that had nothing to do with money. And you spent 2 years making a plan to replace her with something smaller. Yama, I am not finished. The tone that had ended arguments since he was 7 years old. You were looking at her and not seeing her. And the tragedy, the real tragedy, Junho, is that she saw you clearly. She saw you clearly the whole time. And she tried anyway. For years she tried. And when she finally stopped trying, she did not destroy you. She simply left. She took what was hers, she protected her child, and she left. The silence stretched. That, his mother said, is a woman with more character than anyone else in this story, including me. He sat in the quiet of his empty study and said nothing for a long time. Is there anything I can do? He finally asked, the voice of a man who has just for the first time, understood the actual shape of what he has lost. His mother was quiet for a moment. "You can be present for your daughter," she said, "and you can show up on that screen every Friday and be genuinely present. You can stop grieving the life you lost and start being worthy of the one you still have access to." And Imani? Imani, his mother said, has made her decision. A woman who plans the way she planned has already moved forward. You do not chase someone like that. You simply accept, as late as you are in understanding it, that she was always the most capable person in that marriage. She paused one final time. "Learn from it," she said. "That is all you can do now." She hung up. Junho set his phone on the desk. He looked at the wall across from him, the wall of his empty study, the wall that had held, until 3 weeks ago, a framed architectural photograph Imani had chosen and hung and lit with a small picture light, because she said beautiful things deserved to be seen properly. The wall was bare now, just a small square of slightly brighter paint where the frame had kept the color clean. He looked at that square for a long time. 3 weeks after Imani arrived in Atlanta, she received a voicemail from a number she didn't recognize. She was in her Virginia Highland townhouse kitchen, south-facing light pouring across the island, coffee in her hand, Hana at her feet drawing something elaborate with colored pencils on a large sheet of paper. The climbing rose outside the kitchen window was opening, small and pink, and entirely indifferent to everything that had happened to bring Imani to the window that looked out on it. She listened to the voicemail. It was Mrs. Seo Myongja. "Imani." The old woman's voice was careful and quiet. Not small, never small, but careful in the way of someone choosing each word with full awareness of its weight. "I do not know if you will listen to this. I would not blame you if you did not. I am calling because I have some things to say that should have been said 5 years ago." A breath. "I called you the American. I said it as though it was simply a description, but we both know it was not. I was telling you that I did not see you as fully belonging. I was wrong. Not just wrong. I was unkind. And I was unkind to a woman who was building a home for my son and raising my granddaughter with more love and intelligence than I had the sense to recognize." Another breath, slightly unsteady. "I am not asking you to come back. I am not asking you to forgive me, although I would be grateful if someday you chose to. I am only asking, if you are willing, let me know my granddaughter. Let me call her on Sundays. Let me tell her stories about where her father came from. Let her know that part of her is loved from soul." The voice cracked once, just once, then steadied. "Please." The voicemail ended. Imani stood at the kitchen window. Outside, the rose was opening in the early Atlanta spring, pink against the weathered fence, small and persistent and astonishingly alive. She thought about what winning looked like. She had planned for this, had mapped every step, executed every move, protected herself and her daughter with a thoroughness that even Margaret Osei had paused to admire. She had won, completely, strategically, on every front. The estate claim, the accounts, the business, the custody, on the documentation, the departure. She had won. And winning, she was discovering, was not a feeling. It was not the relief she had imagined during those 3 months of careful silence. It was not vindication or lightness, or the clean severance she had hoped would feel like a door, finally and permanently closed. Winning was standing in a kitchen in Atlanta, with south-facing light on your face and your daughter at your feet, and a voicemail from an old woman in Seoul who had called you the wrong name for 5 years and was now asking to know her granddaughter, and having to decide, without anyone to tell you what the right answer was, what kind of person you were going to be on the other side of all of this. "Mommy," Hana said from the floor, "look." Imani looked down. Hana held up her drawing. 3 figures this time, not 4. A tall woman, and a smaller woman, and a small round child between them holding both their hands. Above it, in Hana's slanting 4-year-old certainty, "My girls." Imani crouched down to her daughter's level. She looked at the drawing for a long time. Then she looked at her daughter's face, Junho's jaw, her own eyes, something entirely Hana in the specific tilt of her expression. The confidence of a child who has never been given a reason to believe the world is anything other than generous. "Baby," Imani said, "you are the best thing I have ever made." Hana considered this. "Better than your designs?" "Infinitely better than my designs." "Okay," Hana said, satisfied, and went back to drawing. Imani saved the voicemail. She did not call back that day. She was not ready. She would decide when she was ready and not one moment before. And because that was what freedom meant, not the absence of difficult decisions, but the right to make them on your own terms, in your own time, without anyone else's timeline imposed on yours. She opened her notebook. New client, penthouse, Midtown Atlanta. The most ambitious project she had taken on in 2 years. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A brief that asked for something that feels like arriving, and a budget that suggested the client meant it. She wrote the client's name. She wrote budget, vision, timeline. She looked at the page. She thought about everything that had brought her to this kitchen, to this notebook, to this specific morning. She thought about the Tuesday of the laptop, the moment her hand had not shaken. She thought about the 3 months of Sunday dinners and pressed shirts and company dinners and the green dress and the wine glass and the smile that never once cracked under pressure. She thought about her father's voice on the phone, steady and unsurprised. Her mother's arms in the doorway. Brenda Cole, Margaret Osei, Sandra Park, Adiz driving a cargo van through the 3rd Ward with 0 questions and total loyalty. She thought about all the women who had been in her corner, some announced, some silent, some who had not known they were choosing a side until they found themselves already standing on one. She thought about Hana in a Decatur classroom, growing a carrot in a garden bed, and reporting the results with the authority of a scientist. She picked up her phone. She opened her voicemails. She listened to Mrs. and Seo Myung-ja one more time. Then she opened a new message to the old woman's number and typed 4 words. Sundays at 9 a.m. Seoul. She hit send. Then she put the phone face down on the counter, not the way Junho had placed it, face down like a secret. But the way you put something down when you are simply finished with it for now, when you have more important things to face. She looked out the window at the climbing rose. She looked at her notebook. She looked at her daughter on the floor, drawing her world with all the colors available to her, labeling it with the words she chose, making it exactly what she wanted it to be. This, Imani thought, is what freedom looks like from the inside, not an absence, not a severance, not the clean, empty quiet she had imagined during those 3 months of careful silence. An open page, a south-facing window, a daughter who grew things in dirt and reported back with joy, a future that was entirely, completely, unambiguously hers. She smiled. Nobody was watching. She didn't need them to. And so, my people, we leave Imani Grace Okafor in the city that raised her, at a kitchen island in the morning light, with a notebook open and a horizon that belongs to no one but herself. The man who had been planning in secret came home to find that he had been outplanned by the woman he never fully saw. The man who had moved in shadows found that his shadow had been cast by a woman who was already 3 moves ahead of wherever he thought he stood. He thought she was sleeping. She was thinking. He thought she was decorating. She was architecting. He thought she would beg. She built. And here is what this story is truly about. Beneath the strategy, beneath the legal filings and the quiet transfers and the methodical, brilliant execution of a woman who learned from her parents that preparation is its own form of power. It is about what happens when a man looks at an extraordinary woman every single day and decides, gradually and without drama, that she is the background of his story, rather than the whole point of it. It is about what that woman does with that knowledge. And it is about the particular truth that the most powerful thing a person can do, more powerful than confrontation, more powerful than retaliation, more powerful than any scene ever thrown or door ever slammed, is to simply decide. Decide what you will accept. Decide what you will not. And decide who you are when no one is performing for you and the moment is real and the choice is only yours. Imani decided on a Tuesday, in a River Oaks kitchen with a laptop open and a hand that did not shake. Everything else was just execution. The ancestors say, and they have said it in every language, across every ocean, in every house where a woman has been underestimated by someone who should have known better. Never mistake stillness for surrender. The ones who say nothing have often already decided everything, and the ones who have already decided, they do not beg, they simply finish. As for Imani Grace Okafor, she sat in a coffee shop in downtown Atlanta on a bright Wednesday morning the following week. Hannah at school, notebook open, a new city making its sounds around her. Her Chicago firm had called with an expansion offer. Her Atlanta client had increased the penthouse budget. Margaret Osei had sent a note that simply read, "First hearing scheduled. Your position is excellent." She opened to a fresh page. She wrote nothing for a moment, just sat with the clean, white, unlimited possibility of it. Then she wrote one word at the top of the page, "Next," and that, my people, is where we leave her. Not at the end of a story. At the beginning of the one she wrote herself. Some women survive, some women escape. Imani Grace Okafor did neither. She planned, she executed, she protected her daughter, she honored her parents, she extended grace to an old woman who had not deserved it, but who had asked for it honestly. And then she sat down in the morning light of a new city and went back to work. That is not surviving. That is not escaping. That, precisely, completely undeniably, that is arriving.